Hello and welcome. We're going to get straight to the point today. So, Wharton rejects thousands of qualified applicants every single year. Applicants with strong academic records, solid employers, and leadership experience. That's typically not what is missing in a candidate's application. What's missing is strategic clarity of who they are, what they bring to the table, and why they've chosen a Wharton. Most applicants don't really understand how to frame their decisions, their goals, their values in a way that resonates with Wharton's evaluation model in terms of how they evaluate a candidate. So today I'm going to walk you through how Wharton assesses candidates and what separates the applicants who get in from the ones who don't, even when their resumes look similar on paper. And let's face it, we know that a lot of consultants and investment bankers apply to these schools, including Wharton. So how do you differentiate yourself from one to the other? What I'm going to be talking about today is going to also include some examples from CA Admissions clients. One who got into the healthcare management program with a below 3.0 GPA, and another one who pivoted from traditional consulting, into a tech career aspirations. These outcomes weren't the result of luck or spin. They were the product of thoughtful, intentional strategy, something that most applicants don't realize they're missing in their application until it's too late. And that's what we're here to talk about. Before we dive in, I would love to hear, I've seen quite a lot of interest on this topic today, so I would love for you to write in the comments where you're connecting from, which round you're applying to, and any questions that you have as we're going to go through the Q&A at the end of the presentation. Also, if you like content like this, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel, because every week we give insights into a different topic related to the MBA journey. And if you're going through this process, you're going to want to be a part of that conversation and not miss any of those details out. So when it comes to the evaluation criteria for Wharton, it's important to remember that Wharton makes admission decisions based on, or rather does not make decisions based on brand name employer or polished leadership cliches. Of course, those matter to a certain extent, but like I said, there's a lot of Deloitte applicants, McKinsey applicants, Bain applicants that are applying to these schools, and how do you differentiate? So what they're actually evaluating is your capacity to think critically, lead systematically, and develop impact at scale. They're looking for candidates who've made intentional career decisions. That means they want to see how you process information, how you make choices under uncertainty, and how your past performance connects to your future vision. They also pay close attention to how your goals align with Wharton's ecosystem, its academic structure, research centers, entrepreneurship centers, as well as professional communities across Wharton. If you can't clearly articulate what you'll contribute and how you'll grow during your time there, your application will read as uniform, no matter how strong the credentials are. So no matter the brand names that you have on there. So this is about how you think and how that thinking translates into value for the institution while you're there, as well as long-term. So Wharton's admit pool isn't filled with the most impressive applicants on paper. And that's something that often applicants going through this process overlook, or think that actually these are individuals who are superstars in their space. That's actually quite erroneous thinking. What the classroom is filled is with individuals with most intention. Candidates who've thought through their trajectory, who understand why this program, and who can articulate that vision without defaulting to vague industry jargon. And too many applicants lead with labels. So like firm name, your job title, or awards, or your undergraduate institution. Why you move from one role to another is what Wharton cares about in terms of your decision, in terms of showcasing your decision making. And that's obviously one example. They also look for how each experience shaped your thinking and how all ties into where you're going next. And of course, why Wharton is a necessary part of that path as you build your future. So if your application reads like a set of accomplishments instead of a cohesive story, it's gonna be really hard for you to land an interview and an admit. The admission committee isn't filling a class full of resumes. They're building a room of thinkers, leaders, and operators who make sense together and who are headed somewhere specific that will, of course, build the brand for Wharton, continue its success in terms of how employers look at Wharton students in the marketplace. Wharton is often grouped with the M7 programs, but its admission lens is actually quite distinct. And if you don't understand their admission lens, you risk definitely missing the mark. So they prioritize analytic thinkers, excuse me, that's a tongue twister for me, who lead through structure. Candidates who can operate in ambiguity, synthesize data, and move initiative forwards without needing to be the loudest in a room, for sure, but who do it with intention and in a collective setting. They also look for leaders who can scale, not just one-off wins. So I won this one time that I did this one thing, but repeated patterns of execution across different contexts, whether that is in your work experience, prior work experience, your extracurriculars, and other things that you're going to be highlighting. So if your application doesn't really show progression of growth, of influence, and system level thinking, it's really going to be difficult to stand out for schools that really cares a lot about those components. They can't teach you to be a systems thinker. They can teach you frameworks, but those are components that you have to communicate in your application to Wharton. And finally, they're deeply attuned to your goals, not just whether you are ambitious, but whether you are relevant. And I know that can be a hard pill to swallow, but they want to know that you understand the sector you're entering and whether you thought critically about how Wharton's going to help you accelerate your ability to lead within that sector that you're looking to enter. So thoughtfulness is an important piece of your Wharton application, obviously interview as well, and we can talk more about the interview down the line. So what do we do here at SIA? So we coach applicants to build a narrative that reflects who they are, how they think, and where they're going, with a level of strategic depth that top-tier MBA programs like Wharton really demand in the applicants that they're saying yes to. We work with applicants who understand that surface-level polish isn't really enough to stand out in these applications. They want to challenge their thinking, pressure test their goals, and articulate a value proposition that stands up to scrutiny when the admission committee is evaluating, assessing, and commenting on your application in the process of the evaluation criteria. And really, that's where we come in. Every application we support is bespoke. We don't just edit essays, for sure. We help applicants build a strategy of all the different pieces that come together in a strong application, from resume sequencing to recommender prep to essay framing. We make sure every part of your application reinforces your vision and all of it is speaking cohesively your decision-making process and your institutional fit to Wharton, but also to other top 20 business schools. And we also work with a limited number of applicants every round because obviously doing this right requires time and partnership across the individuals that we work with one-on-one. So let's go into some cases, as I promised in the beginning of this presentation, of some of the clients that succeeded at gaining admission to Wharton. So the first one I'm going to talk about is a client who came to us with a below 3.0 GPA and was several years older than the average Wharton applicant. On paper, he may have been considered high risk, but what he did have was a clearly defined mission in healthcare and the credibility to back it up through real-world experiences. Our strategy in terms of communicating the GPA in particular in the years of work experience wasn't to explain away the GPA. It was to shift the lens. We built the application around his long-term vision for healthcare system reform, and obviously not focusing entirely on his academic performance. We clarified why now, why the MBA, and obviously why specifically Wharton, and how the HCM program would accelerate his impact in the healthcare space. Every part of the application reinforced this thesis. His resume emphasized operational leadership in healthcare delivery. His recommenders spoke to his capacity to execute. His essays aligned his trajectory with Wharton's healthcare strength. And he was admitted to a track that accepts essentially about 70 applicants a year, not around a year. And not because we made him look flawless, because no one ever is, but because we positioned him as indispensable to the Wharton community and to the cohort. And I can say that he is doing really well there, currently having finished his first year. And then I want to bring another candidate. Oops, I think I went too far. Yeah. So another candidate that we helped here at SIA, and this was a client who had a strong consulting background, but zero direct exposure to product, engineering, or tech innovation in his core casework that he's done in consulting up until he applied to business school. He wanted to pivot into product strategy role post-MBA, but his profile didn't really justify exactly the shift. It wasn't a clear narrative. So we focused in part of our work that we do here at SIA is really help understand the client's journey. And what this helped us uncover is a pro bono project that he had worked on, one where he collaborated with a tech nonprofit to anchor, or rather helped us anchor this tech pivot that he was going to anchor his application around. Of course, this was not a tech role, so it was a pro bono project, but it gave us something authentic to build from in an application. From there, we built a layered application strategy. So the essays tracked how that project reshaped his professional lens. His resume highlighted transferable skills and problem-solving abilities, as well as cross-functional leadership. That is, of course, quite custom to consulting space. But all of it was brought from the lens of where he was going. And his goals were framed with clear market insight and alignment with Wharton's innovation ecosystem. He was, on paper, quite a standard consultant applicant that is applying to business school. But when the final presentation was presented and how he performed across all pieces, so not just submitting an application, but during the interview as well, it became really clear that he was admitted because his application really did show intellectual honesty, leadership progression, and values-aligned path forward. And that's what really Wharton respects in an applicant. It's not just filling in the right words. So in terms of the application, Wharton has, we're just going to focus on this like main application parts, not the full application, because obviously we don't have enough time for that. But a few things to note is that Wharton's essays are actually quite short, or quite what may seem really straightforward, but they're actually quite strategically dense. Most applicants underestimate these essays because of how straightforward they are, but they're actually not, and I'll tell you why. So essay 1 asks about your goals and why Wharton. Quite straightforward, right? But what it's really testing is clarity of thought. Can you articulate your trajectory in a way that reflects sound decision making, personal logic, and relevance to Wharton's program and ecosystem? You really can't Google that. You can't showcase how all of this communicates to you by just using the internet, essentially. A strong essay or strong response to this question has to come from actual introspection and an ability to make connection across your career, your values, and your future plans, all at the same time, while being very specific in terms of why Wharton makes sense. Essay 2 asks what you'll contribute to the Wharton community. This is where most applicants actually go quite generic, and I see this way too often. They say they'll collaborate, or in these clubs, or trying to communicate their collaboration, or their passion about something that they're interested in, without ever connecting it to lived behavior. What Wharton wants to see is actual evidence, and a lot of applicants make a huge mistake in this question, in answering this question rather. So your question to yourself has to be, how have I shaped environments before? How will that behavior that resonates, or that's evident in this example, continue inside of Wharton through the different clubs that you're interested in? So it's much more complex, much more depth to these answers than meets the eye. And the best applicants really show synergy between the two. The goals that require community, contributions that reinforce leadership. And that's what we train our clients to execute on in terms of their applications. This is the slide that I wish more applicants saw earlier in the process. And if you're right now, today is June 26th, and we have essentially about a month and 10 days or less until Wharton's application deadline. I want you to really come back to this as you're working on your applications and revisit this discussion, because it's going to be really important in making sure that you put together a strong application. And the reason why the slide is so important is because people fall into these traps. And the people that do fall into these traps are typically the ones that have the most potential. So first, they assume that their prestige is protection. So again, consulting companies, investment banking companies that are household names. So like McKinsey, JP Morgan, any one of those. A strong GMAT score, 740 in the classic edition, or glowing recommendations in terms of who you've asked to put together your letter of recommendation. And applicants think that these themselves, in and of themselves, are going to be the elements that are getting carried through the application. But none of those actually answer the real question that Wharton is looking for as a baseline, as elementary. What do you want? Why now? And why Wharton? Those are really important questions that introspection is required effectively to be done in order for you to be able to succeed in your Wharton application journey. And second, they treat essays like storytelling exercises, when what Wharton is really looking for is synthesis, the ability to extract a lesson a shift in perspective, or a pattern of leadership. If your essay is a scene by scene recap of your job or of your journey in your career, it's honestly, I'm going to be very transparent, it's quite boring to read. And they will go through the reading process as they have to, but you will not be memorable. And you want to be a little bit memorable. You don't have to be, having, fireworks going, but it does need to be a little bit memorable in terms of who you are presenting. And then third, they treat Wharton like a safety net in their M7 strategy. The tone comes through. Vague goals, generic reasons for applying, or trying to put in too many applications that you don't have time to really develop each one separately. And then what happens is that it lacks specificity. And Wharton notices this. They are trained, they've been doing this for so many years. They see so many applicants every single year that apply to the school. And if you are generic, they just won't move your application on to the next phase in the process, which is the interview. So your job is to make sure that you're applying to schools that is reasonable for you with your time limit. If you stretch to apply to 10 different schools, it's too much for any one applicant who has a full-time job. So from the context of the clients that we work with, what separates the how they show up is we actually catch these patterns. We're guiding them through these, making sure that they're not making these mistakes along the way, every step of the way, and help restructure this before it's too late, before they submit, and then obviously you can't go back from here. So we're going to open the chat, the questions for questions. So if you have a question wherever you're joining from, please write it in the comments of your platform, and I'll try to answer as many as possible. And of course, if you are applying to round one or just starting the evaluation if Wharton is the right fit, meaning you're applying, round 2 or next year, this is your chance to get a little bit of clarity before committing your time or make mistakes that are really hard to reverse once you submit. So, and while you're here and you're thinking about your question, I also wanted to just point a few details that can be helpful in this journey for you. So, of course, follow us on YouTube and LinkedIn. We publish deep dives on application strategy, obviously school-specific insights like this one, and client case studies that can be helpful in your journey. But of course, this is the internet. It's very much more macro level. If you want a little bit more personalization to this, I would encourage you to join the MBA Strategy Circle. And this is a community that we come together. I am the host. I answer questions that you may have. So this is where we can go a little bit deeper into the specific questions that you have in a safe environment that is not going to be plastered all over the internet. So you can ask questions like, how do I shift my goals for a stronger institutional fit? What story structure actually converts? And you can bring in examples that you have. I will be able to ask and to guide you through that process. We meet every other week for a 1-hour call. And then you also have an implementation session for accountability to make sure that there is forward momentum along the way. So there's going to be a link to this either on the screen or in the chat where you are joining. And then if you want more hand-holding, a lot more hand-holding, then I invite you to reach out for private consultation. So if you know that this cycle is for you, next cycle is for you, and you want expert support through this entire process, whether it is to prepare applications as you are currently or to help you develop your profile for a stronger application when you apply next year, we can offer one-on-one coaching, and those are limited one-on-one coaching spots because we only take on candidates first and foremost that we believe in, and second, to be able to provide the full partnership. We cap it at 12 candidates per round. And what you'll walk away with is a strategy, a clear execution plan, and a support system that reflects the real complexity of this application, because it is quite complex, this entire process. So we have about 5 minutes. I'm going to shift to questions, and we'll go from there. Thank you. I won't mention your names, but you know who you are. Thank you for the lovely comment. Okay, so there's another question that says, how does Wharton look at reapplicants, and how can ORM, I don't know what ORM stands for, can distinguish? So reapplicants, I'm assuming that's what that means, distinguish themselves. So Wharton definitely looks at reapplicants from a positive lens. However, I will say, don't just reapply if you haven't done many changes in your candidacy from the last time you applied. Wharton puts a lot of effort in evaluating if a candidate is the right candidate and if it's the right fit at this time. And your application, if you've made slight changes, it's not gonna yield different results next time. So your job is to really make sure that you have strengthened your candidacy from last time, whether that's retaking of your test scores, adding, having completed a HBS core class or something along those lines, having a promotion, getting more exposure, joining, it just needs to be a substantially stronger application than you submitted last year, or whenever that was, the last time you applied. Excellent. Okay. So let's go with the questions that came through the registration. You guys had a lot of questions, which I love. Okay, so how to connect my application essay with future career prospects in the best way to make sure admission, to secure admission successfully without the mismatch. This is a very straightforward question, but it's quite a complicated answer because it does require introspection. That's always going to be the first thing. First and foremost, before you start trying to match someone else's energy out there, you have to figure out who you are personally. What do you bring to the table? What are your strengths? Where are areas for development that you need? And in terms of your career, that should be an indication of where are you taking your career? Why are you doing an MBA? This is not something that anyone can tell you specifically, because without working with you one-on-one, you have to really dive deeper into your personal experiences and look at your strengths and your weaknesses. Look at where you're looking to go in terms of your career. Are you staying in the same sector? Are you pivoting? What are you doing? And then building the match between, who you are and the school. You don't have to match the school in every single category, in every single way, but you do have to emphasize the areas where you are strongest match. Okay. Can you explain the application process and why the work experience is required for these business schools? Yes, every business school, top 20 business school, I shouldn't say every, top 20 business school requires a minimum of 2 years of full-time work experience post-college to be considered and admitted. Most applicants have 5 years of work experience on average, which means that if you have lesser years of work experience, you do have to capture how you are mature enough at this point in your career to make the pivot. And this is quite important for younger applicants that are considering applying to business school this year. You do have to showcase a level of maturity, a level of readiness for an MBA program, and obviously a level of ability to contribute to the program effectively to make the pivot and make the switch. In terms of the process, it does require quite a lot of introspection. If you haven't started the process at this point, in terms of haven't done anything about your application, haven't thought about schools, or just started thinking about schools, you probably round one, it should be written off as not something you should be applying to, but consider round 2 or next year. And if you don't have any work experience, obviously you have to wait, you have to develop your profile. But it requires your goals, it requires an understanding of what you want to do. essays, letters of recommendation, resume, short answer questions, video essays, interview. It's a lot of different pieces associated with the process. And you want to plan this entire application process sooner rather than later. All right, we're at time. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We'll be monitoring the comments if you have additional comments for the next week. So write your questions especially if you're watching this as a replay. Write your questions so we can help answer those through the comment form. But again, we always invite you to join either the MBA Strategy Circle for discussions and ask your specific questions to me directly in a private space. As well as, if you want more personalized, bespoke experience, definitely join the one-on-one coaching through our comprehensive coaching options. And then last thing, we are currently in the process. So if you're thinking about Wharton, you do want to join our Wharton team-based discussion interview simulation. Obviously, to actually register for this, you do need an actual offer letter. But right now, we are building a wait list of individuals who, obviously, once you're invited to interview, you have an option to actually join the session. But definitely register for Wharton's TBD waitlist, and this is going to be released in October when Wharton releases their interview invites. Thank you again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next week when we're going to talk about Stanford's MBA application. So if you're considering Stanford, definitely join, and if you have friends who are considering Stanford, share the invitation with them for them to join. Until next week, thanks again for being here with us.